Sadie, we're in the deconstruction zone.
We are.
What's going on?
Well, I'll tell you the thing that has changed my brain the most the past 48 hours is that I am on a new ADHD medicine.
Oh, which one? Can you say that?
Addo.
Will HIPAA let you tell us?
It's HIPAA's for the doctors. For me, it's as much as I want to share, which, as it turns out, is a lot. So, actually, my friend Austin sent me a long, he researched and he was telling me all the differences in my previous ADHD medicine and my new one. So the one that I'm on is not a stimulant.
Oh.
Which is good.
Good.
Yeah, because you don't want to get addicted and all that nonsense. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. You're on it. How long have you been on it for?
2 days.
Have you felt the effects?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Really? Okay.
I mean, have you ever been on any type of brain type of thing?
No.
It's weird. It's interesting because you're still you, but it just feels different up there. Up there being brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. So, but it's also because it's new. I think I might feel it more.
Yeah.
Because it's just it's a new medicine. It's a new feeling. The first time that I tried any ADHD medication, I was like, whoa, people can finish their thoughts as they have a sentence.
Yeah,
that's really nice.
Well, I'm happy for you. Welcome to
Thanks.
2 days on your new stuff.
My new stuff that I can't remember or pronounce.
Yeah, but it works.
It does.
Who needs to pronounce it if it works?
Not me.
What
about you? What's new with you?
That's a good question. Not much. So the beginning of summer is always interesting because it's what I hope to be. I'm so excited about it. It's the summer's here, schedules shift, time opens up. But really the first 2 weeks of summer are not that because really the first month, because Annie's basketball season is still going in full effect, and because she's not
really?
on
regular season,
not regular season, but summer basketball.
Oh, okay,
and, she's running a camp right now for the youth girls in the community.
Gotcha.
Our son just had a camp the other day or last week, for his, and so it's a little bit more chaotic because there's not the grounding of the normal schedule of well, at least she's just in school, so I know.
Yeah.
And I'm really flexible. Now she's a little more sporadic, which feels flexible. So after this week, and then this weekend is annual conference for the United Methodist Church. So that's very busy. You'll be at it too.
Yeah, I'll be at it a lot.
Yeah, you'll be busier than I am probably.
Yeah.
So things are good. Things are busy, but it's not really it's chaotic. I don't know if busy is the right word. It just is very haphazard.
And I think it's always, there's a difference between busy when you're in a routine, but you're also busy, and then the chaotic type of busy where it's things are kind of new. Yeah. I'm having to check my schedule a lot more because I'm not used to this kind of new routine yet. So
yeah, I thrive off busyness. I don't thrive off chaos. And so it's I can be really busy, and I'm I get really organized, and I knock things out, and I like the rapid pace change and going from thing to thing. But if it's not well organized, then it feels like chaos. And I'm not always the best organizer. Sometimes the busyness organizes itself for me. So, but yeah, summer's been good. Been at the pool a lot, but it's been chaotic.
I've been at my friend's pool a lot, not now.
Yeah, come to the Webster Groves pool with us sometime.
Oh, okay.
You can listen to the podcast.
Come to the Webster Grove pool with us sometime.
One of my first memories of being a pastor. So the first church I worked at in St. Louis was the Gathering.
Yeah.
And then I was the pastor of their Webster site, and I had just moved to Webster, and Webster is what people, it's not a knock, but what it's known for is it's small town vibes. Mm-hmm. People really like that. There's a lot of positives and negatives to that, which is an episode on its own.
Right.
But I was you know what? It doesn't feel that small. I never lived in a small town before, and I just think everything is St. Louis. So I think of it as a bigger metro area. Mm-hmm. But at the time, now I know it's everyone has their own pockets. But I remember the first time going to the pool, I'm terrible at names and remembering people. Mm-hmm. And it's even worse when you're shirtless or you're in a swimsuit. Cause I see you in baggy church clothes all the time.
Yeah.
And I just remember talking to people at the pool and being I don't know who this person is. And
Dang.
it took me like 3 months to be able. And then I started joking about it. I was like, just know that I don't think about you guys in your bathing suits. And so like when I see you, I'm not going to know who you are.
Right. Please remind.
But it was like I had to get to know 300 people like that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people to get to know. But it just made me laugh. Like out of context, you see these people all the time. And then in a different outfit or in a different place, you're like,
who are you? You're a stranger. Yeah. I nannied over there for a little bit. Yeah. So I have a little bit of knowledge of the vibe over there.
Yeah. At the pool or?
Not the pool.
Yeah.
But
the vibe at the pool was very biblical in the sense that it felt like the
healing?
Plagues.
Oh.
There, for the first week, and this is not a joke, there were piles like this high of hundreds of cicadas that they were scooping out with like dads were like hat scooping them out, and they were like using their nets, but you couldn't walk without hitting 1 to 5 every step. Like they were everywhere.
That's gross.
Yeah.
And they're like different than normal bugs, I think, because they'll land and they'll stay, but they're still like really flappy, which is gross.
Yeah, they're for being very flappy, they're also unflappable in the sense that
they won't go away.
They won't go away. They don't care. They're like, kill me. They just don't care. But the big hail thunderstorm that came through like knocked a bunch. So like the pool's been great, but for the first week, it was like no kids were there, no parents were there because the kids wouldn't go in the water.
Yeah, but the cicadas were there.
The cicadas ruled the pool.
And it really makes sense. I mean, not to go back to the 10 plagues, but like I could see that with the cicadas. I feel like we're having a plague.
Yeah, it felt very plague-like.
What's
Annie and I
next?
talked a lot about of like science and whatnot. It's like if you were living in this time.
Yeah, I'd be like, God's mad at us.
Yeah, but it was like the knowledge of biblical times. Would you just be like, is this a plague?
Right. I'm still thinking about that right now. I think that maybe this is a plague. Maybe this is God's judgment.
It might be.
Yeah.
Different episode. But you and I were texting last night about what the episode might be.
Yeah.
And you and I, behind the scenes, the little BTS content is we have an iPhone note, which I think is very funny named. You named it the Deconstruction Zone.
Thanks.
And I thought it was a typo, and then I was like, I see what she's doing
here. Nothing's ever a typo. Everything is always on purpose.
But the episode, you chose all these like general themes, and
don't say I chose them. These are ideas. Yeah. These are my things.
Yeah, the rhythm usually goes: you fill this note, and then on the day before, you'd be like, "What are you thinking?" And then I'll be like, "Here's my ideas."
Right.
And the one that I thought was most interesting was how TF do mega churches happen, and why should we go to them? Could add if we should go to them, and
that might be a typo,
or if we should support them.
Yeah.
So I think Dustin and I did an episode about mega churches. Like we talked about pastors with billboards and a little bit preacher sneakers, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you and I think are like, for people that are a part of a progressive new church plant that is not a mega church, are probably more pro mega church than people would imagine. But we're also not pro what mega churches become, if that makes sense. Like the idea of a church growing doesn't bother either of us, but what mega churches have become, I think, bother both of us.
Yeah, definitely.
So I thought, let's talk about it, because I think for a lot of our audience, it's like, I know people that listen that have worked at mega churches, that have gone to mega churches, many of which aren't involved in any church anymore. The big knock on mega churches is they have huge front doors, but double the size of back doors, meaning like, to use the Mark Driscoll analogy, and not every church does this, but like, they leave the trail of bodies behind them, right? Like, and they don't really care about who leaves because there's just as
always
many
more
coming
people.
And that is a negative. But what are your like initial thoughts on mega churches, and kind of knowing that not only does it lead into what a lot of our audience is probably, it's played some role in some of their deconstruction.
Yeah.
But they're also not all bad, at least from my opinion. You might disagree, but
I mean, I haven't found. Well, maybe. Is the Gathering considered a mega church? Are they? So a mega church is classified as over 2,000 people.
Yeah, so they would be a mega church.
Okay.
They're like 6,000.
Okay, never mind. I was gonna say that I haven't been to a good mega church, but then I guess I have. So I've been to one that I would say is like is a mega church that like isn't exploiting people and isn't like, you know, becoming a machine and growing almost just for the sake of growing. What was the question originally?
Just general like thoughts on it.
General thoughts. I might have like more personal megachurch experience.
Yeah.
So I kind of know some of behind the curtain. Like I've been flown out to like apply to certain places, or
Yeah.
I've gotten to like the levels in the like in the application process in a few different places. Was that ever interesting, or were you ever drawn to megachurches? Because I have, and
Yeah.
that is something that I kind of have to like reconcile and think about.
Yeah, I was actually, just as you're thinking about that, I was thinking about that. So the Gathering is technically a megachurch in terms of size. Like 6,000 is a big church. And when I was there, they were 3,000 or 4,000, so it would have been in that classification. But I was applying for a church in Chandler, Arizona, that is a megachurch, and it was probably in the same like 6 to 8,000 range, maybe even less. But what was interesting to me as I reflect back on it, like, because both places flew me out, because I was living in Oregon, and so like flew me out, took me through the whole process, and I was kind of weighing my options at the same time, like what am I going to go to, and like very different, and like I would probably be a very different person. One was like a lot more like conservative evangelical, the Gathering much more like open and progressive evangelical.
Right.
But what I was thinking about as you were talking is like the churches in scope are the same size. But what is interesting is one felt very much like a machine, and the other felt very organic. Like the Gathering felt very organic. And like the Gathering has like systems and structures and is a big church and all that kind of stuff. And so in many ways is a machine. And so you can't like say that it's not that. But the vibe of like, as I was going through the process, one felt like I was just like this cog in a larger machine that like served a purpose of getting more butts in the seat.
Yeah.
And the other one, like the Gathering, felt very much like we see a problem in the community. We think our church is a unique solution to that.
Yeah.
And I think the other one felt that way, like Jesus is the solution and like that kind of thing. But it felt very much like a conveyor belt in some ways. Yeah, no, I had not thought about the comparison of those two, but it really was like I was leaving Portland, working at like a 200-person church, running a nonprofit, and working at a seminary, and being like, I need to do one job.
Yeah.
And this, on paper, the one in Arizona, seemed like my dream job. And they were both kind of the same job. It was like college pastors, essentially, was the job I was starting at in both. But yeah.
That's funny. I have one of the mega church that I actually like worked at and had a lot of experience at. There was a guy who like fit that description that eventually, because
what description? Sorry.
The description of like the young guy like stepping into college ministry.
Oh yeah.
Because it's interesting because usually they're like, for lack of a better term, they're like grooming that guy to eventually become like maybe an associate pastor, and then eventually like 40s or 50s age wise probably you would become the lead pastor of that megachurch.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what I've noticed in places, is that like oftentimes there is like a kind of unspoken, but it's like you can probably guess who the next lead pastor is going to be.
Yeah, there's like a path and like a succession in those churches, especially this one was non-denominational, and so but this one, so that was part of what the allure was. I was like, oh, I could be the lead pastor of this thing in 20 years.
Yeah.
And I knew it wouldn't be a soon thing. But I will also say the guy who connected me was the lead pastor's son, and he will be the lead pastor. And so like part of my reason of being like, I'm not that interested, it was like the nepotism within the church was really interesting. And I just saw a TikTok about this. It was a clip from a larger podcast that I didn't look to see what it was from. But it was about like the nepotism in churches. Like Joel Osteen has his kids like being kind of, and groomed is the wrong word, but prepared for
intentionally
taking it over. Craig Rochelle.
I think that might be the definition of groomed.
It might be. I think Craig Rochelle's kids are somewhat involved, but I don't know how involved. I know that Driscoll just had his kids become pastors. Like that's just like what was it? Billy Graham, like his son. There is this idea of like, and what this podcast is talking about is like they're essentially treating them like $billion small businesses that are family businesses. Like you're handing it off to your kid. But that was something that was really normal in the church world that I was experiencing. And then as I was applying and getting into it and seeing like the real life implications of it, it's like the first one that I had been a part of where like the kid was a part of it. And I was like, and the other ones were there. I was like, I don't know if not only because it directly impacted my trajectory there, but it just like felt like how much can we really do outside of the conversations you guys are having at the dinner table or at Thanksgiving. Oof. Like really you guys are the ones making the decision and I'll never be a part of it.
That's really interesting. I'm almost, as you're talking about it, I'm thinking of just kind of like it's specifically American and Western, I think. So not just American, but Western is like, we love a family. Yeah. You know what I mean? We love the royal family. We love the, well, depending, like we look up to the first family, like the president and his family, like, or at least I remember the Obamas. We're like, first I knew all about the Obamas whenever they were in office.
Yeah, especially if they have kids. I mean, like Trump's family was
right,
like very known, like the Clintons, like people know.
Yeah,
those
you
families.
know them.
Yeah, and even like I just saw TikTok of Kamala Harris's husband. It's like no one would care about him otherwise, but it's like because they're a family.
Yeah, he's the first gentleman. We know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. It's like the church and the nepotism and like our desire, like, because I think it probably speaks to something we long for.
Yes.
And as say you're a mother or a father and you have your kids and you're like, well, this church has a really great lead pastor and they're preparing their son to take it over.
Look at this legacy.
Yeah, and it's like, I want to leave that myself. And I'll never be the pastor of a church, but I could do this in my own house. And I think it's like, I do think you're onto something in the sense that like, people don't push back against it because in their own families they're like, I want to do something similar, you know?
Yeah. Interesting.
But I do think it's problematic for churches. Wasn't necessarily where we were going with this, but I think the idea of like even like the analogy I gave of like this family sitting around and like they're going to like Cardinals games, like Arizona Cardinals games with pro athletes. This church was like the church
for that area.
Like it was a Phoenix suburb and like lots of like
there's usually one or two in each like major city.
And it's like it has like, and there are other big ones in Phoenix, but it was like this one had like celebrities at it, this one had people that were part of it, and that was all cool and it was engaging people. But it was like what I realized too is in one of my conversations with the lead pastor, I'm like sitting around this thing and funny story just popped in my head, but I just kept being like, this is an inner circle I'll never break into. And how interested are they in any sort of feedback that isn't themselves or from themselves? But what was funny is I remember we all had iPhones and like it was like the iPhone 12. It was the first Max, like the big iPhone came out. And I remember like sitting in our interview and like it was the first time I encountered this, but like hip churches were like, there was a time when like, if you don't use a Mac, you can't be a part of it. And they were like very much that. Like, like I remember someone making a joke, like if you didn't have an iPhone, we wouldn't even consider you. And I was like, dang. What? Like, and I did.
Well, it's those green messages.
Yeah, and it's like I hate green messages. But I'm like, that's like
but that is wild.
There's a level of like privilege and lack of awareness to be like, we're gonna like to make, and we were talking about appropriate jokes and funny jokes before we started recording. And like that's one of those things that it's like the lack of awareness of what the joke is doing and implying is like to that person they had like no context.
Yeah, no clue. Absolutely no clue.
Yeah. So what, let's talk, so what mega churches for some people are all about size, right? Like it's the size is the issue. It's like there's the leadership issue, which we can touch on a little bit more of, like there's nepotism, and then it's like we talked about this a few weeks ago of like the church you were at. It's like bottlenecked. It's like the lead pastor protected by the head of staff, and then like no one gets to the lead pastor. But another thing from like a congregational level is like some people are like, well, I just like to be known. So if it's over 1,000 people, I don't know people. Or if it's over 300 people, I don't know people. Or it's at 10,000, I don't know people, right? So from our perspective, like we're at the Well, what would be like the size of the church that like you feel is comfortable in the sense that it's like reaching it's making missional impact of like sharing a story of an inclusive Jesus and transforming lives? And then where does it start to get into the place where you start to like, are we not going the wrong direction, but like you start to get on easy? Or do you have that for like the well?
That's hard. Cause even when I was at a church of like 7,000, I did like a year there, and both things were true, that I would get recognized at the grocery store by like people I didn't know. But whenever I'd show up on Sunday, like I'd walk through the lobby, but it was like huge, like the space before you get to the auditorium. And like I would always run into people that I know and that were in my smaller community that was a part of a huge community. So it was like there was kind of like two realities at once. But I wonder if the tension or things start to get murky when you become not a person but an idea.
Yeah.
To where like the relationship between pastor and person that goes to church is like a little more metaphorical rather than real.
Yeah. I was thinking about that. I think I would agree in like the terms of the church, even like when the church becomes more about the idea of this is the cool place to be, or it's like, I think it's when like the what becomes more important than the why, right?
Yeah.
And the what being in like our sitch, like the what is you become a celebrity, or you become like
right.
the doer or the whatever, and like you're no longer a person.
Yeah.
And I see that happen with churches too, where it's like the church becomes, the brand of it becomes more important than anything. And the negative of that is, and then what you're trying to protect is like not the people or the mission, but the brand.
Right. Know? Right. When it like kind of takes on something that's bigger than itself, but not in a good way, in a way that it's like this person is an idea. And if I talk to my pastor, it feels more like I'm meeting my like a parasocial person rather than like someone who actually knows me.
Yeah. And I remember like when I met Matt for the first time during my interview, I thought like it was like this big deal. Because I was like, oh, he's a church lead pastor at Megachurch. And then like I get there and it's like we were just buddies. Like we got like we're neighbors. Like Matt doesn't drive a Bentley. And not to like only talk about the gathering, but it's like that was my only real experience working in a mega church. And it's like, and that's what Matt and like certain big church pastors do well, is like they know you. And in some ways like the church grows where it's like you can't pastor everyone, right? And so you have to like start to figure out how you do that well. Yeah. But if it becomes this, like you're kind of setting up the meeting and you're sitting in this room and it feels like you're talking to the CEO of the company that you really want to support. You know what I mean? And it's like it feels like you're interviewing more than like having a conversation. Right. Then it starts to just create some interesting issues, right? Yeah.
Well, because I've applied and had a few different like Craig Rochelle's church, they flew me out to Oklahoma. And
is that where the main campus is?
Edmond, Oklahoma. Okay. And like I went through the interview process, like insane. By the way, it was like 6 minutes at each station, and we focused on a different like core value at each place, and you could not go over because all of us that were in like this this flock, this group, like this time, because they are always hiring, to where this little event, this little weekend that we're doing, they do it probably a few times a year, or I don't know how often they do, but there was a group of us, we're all interviewing for like different positions, but we have to rotate, and then we didn't,
it's like speed dating, but
speed dating, but for a job. And then whenever Pastor Craig like did come in for briefly and just like wave at people, and we're like, and then he left, and we're like, wow, we breathe the same air. But then I've done like I got really close to getting an internship at Elevation, and I learned like everyone, you have to call Pastor Stephen. You cannot call him Stephen. Like everyone calls him Pastor Stephen. And like I also did an internship, or almost got a residency with Passion. And whenever I got to my interview, the person interviewing me like hadn't looked at my resume. And I was like, oh, so I'm just going to like tell you a little bit about my resume for this time that we have.
Yeah.
So
you could have read beforehand.
yeah, literally. And so I've been a cog in the machine.
Yeah. And those are like 3 of the biggest churches in America.
Right.
Biggest things. Because Passion's a church, or are they like?
Yes, they're Passion City Church in
Yeah.
Atlanta. But yeah, their big deal is the conference.
Yeah.
But
So it's like, these are all like, I mean, they make churches like the Gatherings and the other like
Sure.
small, you know?
yeah.
And that is funny. It's like, I get the impression, I've never met Craig Rochelle. He seems like he's pretty down to earth. But I get the impression that like certain churches, like if you're going to be like, call me pastor this, it's like they have drank their own Kool-Aid in the sense that like no one should be breathing my air. And it's like, there should be this like reverence to me all the time.
Yeah.
Which I hate because it's like the opposite of what I think we're trying to create at the Well.
Right. When was Jesus be like, you have to call me pastor?
Yeah.
Or like God.
Yeah, you have to call
God.
me rabbi.
You have to call me God Jesus or Rabbi Jesus or like. It was never about the title.
Yeah, and I'm just it's funny. It's again one of those things where it's like the title or the brand or the what becomes more important than the why.
Mm-hmm.
And because like when I think about the Well and the question I asked you, it's like I want, and I say this to people all the time. They ask me about like what my vision is, or like do I want it to be a mega church? Do I want it to stop growing right now? Because you can make a great case like the Well is the perfect size because like everyone knows each other.
Yeah.
And you could also make a case that the Well is so needed, it needs to keep growing to be something really, really large.
Mm-hmm.
And my answer to people whenever they ask me is I'm like, I just want it to grow as big as like God wants it to be, and that we're still able to like effectively do the ministry God has called us to do.
Yeah. Agreed.
And I hope that is really big actually, but like I know my personal bias.
Sure.
And I also know that like as it grows, if it does grow that direction, like there are certain things that need to take place to like make sure our church stays as healthy as possible.
Yep.
Knowing that we all like, and that's the thing that I don't think churches do is like, I know I struggle with things like pride and arrogance and all like things that everyone struggles with. And I try to be self-aware enough to be like, well, if the church gets to a point where I become so prideful of it, that it's like, we need to have something in place to make sure that it's not about me.
Danny.
And if you ever show up and you're like, hey, he's like, call me Pastor Danny.
Nah.
Like you and I even hate calling myself Pastor Danny on social media. Like when we post something on social media, like, hey, read Pastor Danny's sermon. Like, and sometimes I feel like it makes sense to write it that way. Mm-hmm. But like just the title makes me like the title holding it. I don't feel weird about it. It's my title. But to make people call me that is weird.
Yeah.
You know?
I do know. Yeah. I don't know if I could call you Pastor Danny.
But I also have friends that are like, call me Reverend this.
Yeah.
Like, or I want to be called Reverend Danny or Reverend Liebarger.
Well, I got my master's degree, so I'm still waiting for people to call me Master Sadie. But
yeah, well, that was my joke that I made early on. It's like, why don't people do that with masters? No one ever does that with that. It's like there's doctor,
and they should.
There's Reverend.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time where I was like, I paid a lot of money and I put a lot of effort in to get my MDiv and get ordained, and I was like, I earned this. But then it was like this introspective conversation, like, I may have put a lot of hard work into this, but it doesn't do anyone any good to like give me an honorarium before my name.
Yeah. Yeah.
It actually like does the opposite of what I'm hoping we're trying to create at the church.
Right. Interestingly enough, I think megachurches are interesting because a lot of times both progressive people and conservative people are critical of them for different reasons, usually. Like,
it's like the one thing we can agree on.
Yeah, we can agree on. Let's take down the man. But, I think that probably progressive people are critiquing megachurches because of like corruption, unequal power dynamics, exploiting people, etc. And conservative, or at least what I have heard, the conservative argument that is anti-megachurch is like, you're too feel good. You don't talk enough about the Bible. You don't like tell enough truth. Like everything's too like just to make you feel good.
Yeah, it's watered down.
Yeah.
And a really, really conservative person would say it's too progressive, right? Which I think is funny.
Which is wild.
And then someone on the progressive side, I just talked to someone at coffee about this yesterday. They were like, this church was like really fundamentalist conservative theology packaged in a really postmodern way that was compelling to like people.
Interesting.
And that's like why they were growing. And I think that's sometimes the progressive critique is that it's like taking all of the best of progressive culture while holding on to all of the theology of like conservative culture in some ways. But I think both critiques are right. Like, and sometimes though, if I'm being honest, I think progressives don't like megachurches because there's so few progressive megachurches.
Yeah.
Like, I think progressive
Sure.
Christians would feel different if there were more of them, maybe. And I'd say
Probably.
there should be, but that's, I think, an honest critique, at least for myself, is like, I think I'm bummed out. So the gathering was, there's a list of the fastest growing top 100 large United Methodist churches of all time, which is like a very niche stat.
Yeah.
But the gathering was like one of the only progressive churches on there.
Yeah.
And the other ones were like very conservative, somewhat modern, some traditional, but more conservative Methodist churches.
I
And
think.
I was
Go ahead.
always just intrigued by like, oh, and the knock from conservatives would be, or traditionalists, like progressive churches can't grow. That's why there's none on there.
Right.
And I would be like, well, maybe it's just like we haven't found the secret sauce yet. I mean, you know what I mean? Like found a way to do it well. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I hear people like experiencing is like they don't know that progressive Christianity exists, or that it's like possible to kind of hold both spaces. Even like I had a photographer that I worked with a year ago, like he like just reached out and was like, hey, is the well really inclusive? And I was like,
you text me about the message.
I did. Yeah. I asked Danny if he had like a sermon. So, video proof of Danny saying like,
yeah, your message actually said this. It was,
thanks.
Do you have a go-to link of a sermon? Quote, I promise the well is actually affirming, end quote. Which is a good way to word it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I mean, people have really good or really, they know they have experiences that back up their distrust.
Yeah. And I even said it Sunday, I think, in my sermon about like people are often waiting, maybe it's 2 Sundays ago, I think it was a Sunday, of like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Yeah, like waiting for us to not be as inclusive as we say we are.
Yeah.
And it hasn't dropped yet. But
fingers crossed. No, just kidding. We know it's not going to drop.
We know it's not. But
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And it's kind of talking a little bit more about like the senior pastor perspective, but do you think that megachurch pastors are like more prone to moral failures than non-megachurch pastors?
Yes and no. So I think yes in one sense. So I think they are, because they drink their own Kool-Aid, and this is really like broad brushstrokes.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
everyone
yeah.
does this.
Overarching.
Like, there's tons of ones that are great, but I think the reason you're seeing more fail is like they've insulated themselves from any sort of like feedback that isn't affirming, which is part of the nepotism problem. But like when you only surround yourself with feel good pats on the back, you're gonna stop seeing the evil in your own life. We're always wrestling with that. So there's a little like of an insulation problem. You drink your own Kool-Aid, and I think some of them think they're invincible. I think some of them also, because they become celebrities, have not found good outlets to let out their ability to just be humans that mess up sometimes.
Yeah.
And so they like have these things that maybe start as like small sins or whatever, small issues that like grow into like whatever. Like they felt like they couldn't drink or be seen, and then they go on this huge bender because it finally overflowed and they couldn't keep it. Or like there's lots of sexual ones that have happened, and I can't think of what the healthy micro version of that would be, but there's like something that they're like not allowing to be, I think, sustained in their real life, and then they go searching for it other places. So in that sense, I think the insulation and the lack of awareness and feeling like a superhero and invincible leads to it. The other reality is it's happening a lot. I mean, it's everywhere.
Right.
But it also happens in like companies and families and schools, in every profession in the world. It's just pastors are held to a standard where they shouldn't do those things for good reason.
Yeah.
Like, because they're preaching don't do these things.
Yeah.
Many times they're preaching don't do these things. So I think it's higher chances of failure the more of a celebrity you become, in any sense, like whether it's an actor or a celebrity pastor. Like the more celebrity you have, the bigger the microscope is.
Right. Well, because it's like it's kind of like this, as you become less and less, or at least you think that you become like less and less human almost.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, you become to others. You might feel like you're you, but you become the idea of you. And we've talked about this at least off camera, but I think on this before. Like, I am pretty like, I think about everything I put everywhere. Like, and sometimes I seem like unhinged on TikTok or whatever. I thoughtfully think through everything that goes out because I want to make sure it like represents who I am. Now think about that to someone who's a church of 20. Like, I have a small potatoes congregation and a small potatoes impact, and now you're someone that's like has 1 million people in your church and 1 million followers, and you've embodied that to be like your personality is that, and you have to be all this to other people. And then I just think the weight of it leads people to break.
Yeah.
So
well, maybe I don't want the well to become a super mega church.
Yeah.
Because that will happen to me. I'm weak. I'm weak. What do you mean?
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
So that's like, I want the well to grow as big as God wants it to go. Yeah. And I trust God enough to know that if it grows really big, that God will provide the people to help make it be as healthy as it can be. Like, you, to get the church where we are now, have been like a huge godsend. And like, I think God provided a mechanism for you to find us, for us to find you, for you to hang on, applying long enough, and for us to like reach out one last time. And so like that whole story, like I think the Holy Spirit was involved in.
Agreed.
And so I trust in the same way that like if the church got to a point where there was any sort of potential issues, that God would hopefully raise up and provide people
a prophet, if you will,
a prophet to help like in the areas that could be issues, you know?
Yeah. That's good, and that's helpful.
So,
and I trust you enough that like, but I also think that you're human enough that I think I would like call you out on your bullshit if you were being silly.
Yeah,
goose.
I mean that's part of the thing. Is like I think some of these churches, if your first introduction to church is like, I can only refer to them as Pastor Steven, then you can never call them out on their bullshit, right?
Right.
And I think that's part of the issue is like,
Pastor Steven, if you're listening, this is me calling you out on your bullshit.
Pastor Steve, you're doing fine. But I mean, like he.
Oh, thanks for saving me there.
Let's use an example here for a second of him.
Okay.
Like of self-awareness, maybe. Like he wants to be really hip and cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he probably has stylists that pick his clothes. And someone decided he had to wear that god-awful pink $6,000 sweater on Easter Sunday. I don't know if you've seen this.
No, I'm gonna Google it.
It's atrocious. Like I can't believe it costs that much. But part of that issue is like trying to keep up with the brand, I think. But also like no one was like, hey, do you think this will like send the wrong message?
Right.
And I think if I was like showed up one Sunday dressing like not like me, and I was really trying to be hip, and you were like, that cost you how much? I think you'd be like, there's no way you should wear that. I think you'd say that, right? And that's like a smaller issue. But it's like, I don't know those people are surrounded by people comfortable enough to tell them no and call them out on things. And I think that's what I always hope the well is, and the well never outgrows, is being a church that like our size, whether we're 100 or 100,000, is like people feel the ability to call out evil and wrong and BS and stupidity where they see it. And the reality is you and I will do stupid things.
Oh, yeah.
I, like we've messed up. I've like dropped the ball on things. Like those things happen. And it's when you start to act like they don't is when it becomes an issue.
Right, yeah.
And I mean, you're incapable of, like, I can never be wrong. Like, I'm the pastor. I'm always right.
Right.
Which is not true.
That is not true.
I had to say it's not true just in case that gets clipped into a soundbite.
No soundbite. Yeah. Well, I mean, because I've messed up with, like, TikToks before. Like, I said the wrong thing or, like, thought someone commented and meant something else. And you know, and luckily they haven't like really doubled down on that. Like I've been able to like apologize or like take down a video or something and just be like, thank you for telling me, I didn't realize this, or I overlooked this, you know?
Yeah, and even like that's a great example actually. Like, you posted something like completely unintentional like a month or so ago, and my route of correction to you was saying like I think I sent a screenshot, but I was also like, hey, you should take this down. I wasn't like I'm going to do this before like for you and not tell you about it or like do it and then scold you about it. I was like, I'm going to like I don't think I put any shame. I tried not to be like shameful.
No,
I,
I
like,
didn't
hey,
feel that.
I probably wouldn't do this, and I think I would consider taking it down.
Yeah, and I
like,
was like, I didn't realize. I was terrified. I was like,
yeah, and it was a complete accident.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like there was nothing malicious on your side. But like that's the kind of thing where it's like there's a relationship enough to be like, one, I want you to like have the ownership and trust in it. Because if I just fixed it for you or you just fixed it for me, like when I have those issues, I think that doesn't do justice.
Yeah.
But also there was enough trust to be like, I trust that you will see the error of this.
Yeah.
And that you can handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a silly one. But
that was a silly one, but once I saw it, I was like,
you couldn't unsee it once you saw it.
No.
Yeah. And I like watched it and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then I read the comments. I was like, no.
No, yeah. And then I think my phone was on like do not disturb, so I saw your text like maybe an hour after, and I was like, how much time has passed? It's over. It's all over.
And it did pretty well. As far like it didn't do great, but it did okay.
Eek.
So, well, where do we want to go from here? Like, I think as far as like the scope of megachurches, I don't know if I have much more to add, but what do you have for us to kind of close us down on this?
I think, well, I do understand like why people are interested in them, because I was like, and I was even interested in working at them. Like,
so really quick, why are you interested in? Like, so maybe someone isn't. Like,
yeah.
Why are you both in going or working at one?
So for me, a lot of it was the music. Like, I was their worship resident.
Like participating in it, or like the quality of it you liked, or both?
Both. Participating in the quality of it. Like sensory wise, I loved experiencing it, like, because it envelops you. It's like that type of experience. Also, there was a really great young adult ministry that like I met just a whole bunch of friends, and they catered events to me like regularly, you know, and like that type and level of programming a lot of times isn't really possible at smaller places. And like, I can even recognize that like, yeah, there's like some ego involved too, because like there is like the feeling of like just singing for 2,000 people at a time is like wild. And it's like also at the same time, it's beautiful and spiritual, and like because of like because of what I'm bringing and allowing like, or and asking God to like do through me. I don't know. There's a lot of like things and kind of tension that happen at once, but yeah. So that was the experience for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the same thing too, though. For me, it's like the only thing I find compelling about a megachurch is the idea that the story of Jesus has reached that many people. Like, that's what's really compelling to me. But on the same side, it's like it's also cool to preach in front of a lot of people. Like, and I'm like, and part of it's actually like an anxiety thing. The more people there are, the less anxious I am because I can't see as many faces. And so part of it's like the bigger the room is, the more comfortable I am. I remember the first church I worked at in St. Louis when I was at the gathering, our campus would like sometimes be like down to 13 people. So much anxiety. And I remember we did Easter at Stiefel and there was 3,500 people. Like no anxiety. You know? So, but yeah, and I think that's like an interesting and important thing to call out. It's like ego is probably involved in it to some degree, but at the core, like for me, the biggest thing is like I actually think the story of Jesus that we're telling is like that important. And again, just talking to someone who's like just moved out to St. Charles County, was really biased against it for a really long time, and it's like I never want to live here, never would live here, and now lives there, and is excited about a church like ours that exists for the community that really needs it. And like that's the biggest thing for me. It's like I really think what we offer is unique, which is not like Jesus is not unique, but the story that like Jesus is for all people is unfortunately unique in our context.
Yeah.
And I think it does provide us a unique mechanism to reach more people.
Yeah.
And maybe we do, maybe we don't. But I like never want to stifle what God is going to do because, but to your point of the programming, like that's what's compelling is like once the church grows so big that I'm not known in the worship experience, the programming is what draws people in because you feel connected at a smaller level to something.
Yeah.
And that's always the tension is like sometimes churches don't do that because it only becomes about the Sunday show. And then you just feel like a fly on the wall.
Right. Yeah. Although the big difference that I would say is like if I would invite someone to come to church at the megachurch that I was at, like I would be afraid of what the pastor would say and like probably kind of embarrassed to that effect. But like I don't feel that way about the well. And I trust that I would still feel that way no matter how big the well grows. Yeah. Because of like just the values obviously and the inclusivity.
Yeah, well, as long as I'm continually surrounded by people that tell me I'm an idiot all the time and call me out on my BS, I think we'll be okay.
You're an idiot.
Thank you.
We'll be okay.
Play the music. that clip on TikTok.
I forgot that I said play the music after that.
Is that like a line from something?
No.
Okay.
It was just a mic drop, so.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. We haven't done this yet, but as we end, are you reading anything? Anything you want to recommend for anyone? Watching, reading, hearing anything?
Oh, I'm reading.
Catching me off guard, but.
Yeah, I'm reading like 4 books right now, but I'm trying to work on. Well, I just finished one last night. The main book that I would recommend is called "What We Talk About When We Talk About God" by Rob Bell.
Yeah, I was telling them that someone that was my favorite Rob Bell book.
I love it. I think I love it.
How far into it are you?
Over half.
Yeah, that's the one about like quantum physics and like
kind of a lot. Yeah, a lot towards the beginning. Yeah.
That book I thought was like quite wonderful in the sense that like even in terms of like common language, it's like we don't always talk about this. We're not always talking about the same God when we talk about God.
Yeah.
And like it really leads really well into his next book, which is Everything is Spiritual. It's like kind of connecting to this like interconnectedness of all of us. Which I think is the book.
I read them in the wrong order then.
Oh, did you read Everything is Spiritual already? Yeah. Did you like that one?
Yes. Yeah. He writes it reads like you're listening to someone speak, which is probably why one of the reasons why I love. Yeah, he's one of my favorite authors, and hearing him and Richard Rohr talk about God without like they just assume that everyone is already not assume, but like they're not talking to like I don't know, they talk about a God in a way that it's like, what if I would have never had any church hurt or anyone like tell me that
and
God's
like
love is
trying to like convince you. It's like this is just common.
They just talk about it like it's real because it is real.
Yeah, actually when I write, I try to write like Rob Bell because it's like partially it's like that's how I'm very much with you. I read his books not even because I agree with him the most, but he reads like I want to absorb, which is conversational. Yeah, it's very easy to read. He's a quick read too. I'm a slow reader.
Oh, okay.
And so like he reads really quick because of how conversational it is.
Yeah. Are you reading anything?
I'm not reading anything right now, unfortunately.
Listening?
I am reading the Gospel of John since we're doing that as a congregation.
I should do that.
You should join.
Yeah, I should do that.
But yeah, I don't know. Someone just gave me a book that I told someone about that. Let me see if I can pull it up. I haven't got it yet. I ordered it on Amazon Amazon, right? That's Audible and Amazon in the same one.
I don't know. I don't really do Audible. I do podcasts.
The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. It's about this guy who is like a conservative, and this is what it was pitched. I haven't cracked it open yet, but I'm excited to read it. And essentially, he gets like roasted by his conservative friends at his dad's funeral for like saying something on Fox News that was anti-conservative or something like. And so the conversation, I guess, is about like fundamentalism and evangelicalism and like its extremist nature, and how like even like a conservative is like, this is too extreme. So I don't. That's probably a bad summary. The way the person described it to me was quite interesting, and so I'm excited.
I'm interested.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it. So yeah. So I'll maybe let you know when I finish it if I liked it or not.
You will. You'll have to do
So
that.
it's not a recommendation, but it's a. I would love to read it.
During.
But I told someone I was reading it, and he was like, I didn't really like it that much.
Oh.
So maybe I won't like it. So, all right. Well, this was fun.
It was fun.
It was mega fun.
I would agree.
Like Deanna Megachurch.
Yeah. But not exploitively fun.
That's right. Well, friends, this was fun. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week. And also, we should have announced this, right? So, so we have some changes to the podcast coming forward. We're going to be bringing on our friends, JT and Kyle from the Progressive Pastor podcast. Very excited about that. You can kind of think about it like Star Trek, where there's like this intergalactic federation being formed. I've never watched Star Trek.
Neither
actually.
have I.
I was hoping,
we're saying you can think of it as Star Trek. Two people have never seen Star Trek.
I was hoping you would watch it.
No!
Like, oh, yeah, and you were going to like run with it.
What about me made you think that I've seen Star Trek? No offense.
I've not watched it. But so we're forming an alliance, so to speak. And so for us, for you, everything will still live under the Deconstruction Zone. So like our podcast, our brand, our Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, all going to stay there. But their content is going to come and join us, and then the format's going to shift. And so we'll roll that out a little bit more, but you're going to see 2 more faces about once a month, and then kind of a collection of our faces throughout the month.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to be really great content-wise. JT is a pastor at Concord Trinity, as well as Kyle, and they both have kind of different experiences. You and Kyle are the same age, but kind of different upbringings. As much as JT doesn't want to admit it, him and I are the same age. He's like 3 years younger than me, but he would say I'm an old man.
Oh, really? That's funny.
He thinks he's much younger than me, but we're the same person.
The same.
And he's much more academic. I'm much more kind of in the heart. He's kind of in the head, and not in a bad way. And then you and Kyle are kind of like same year, but like have some different vibes in your life and whatnot. And so I think it'll be fun for us, but it'll be cool because I think our hope is to do some cool interviews, dive into like some relevant social, cultural topics, but all of it will still be about kind of deconstructing, whether it's deconstructing certain beliefs or journeying with people through their journey of deconstruction. So it'll be a little bit interesting. So like I think by the time it gets launched, which I think is July-ish, is when we're trying to shoot for this, you'll kind of get the rhythm. You'll know like Mondays or first week of the month is these episodes, second week of the month is these, third, fourth, and you'll get the rhythm. We'll title them a little differently, but yeah, stay on the lookout for that. I think it's going to be fun.
I mean, I'm really excited that the times that the 4 of us have gotten together, like it's a really fun energy, a really we talk about good stuff. It's fun. It's funny. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, the 3 of you are like, the banter will be there. So if you're a banter podcast or your thing, the banter will increase. But in a good way. I think it's going to be really fun. And again, like we're all kind of in this small niche. And so I don't want to be like, we're this radically diverse group. But our thoughts on things, I think we're going to have a lot of disagreements on things. And I like that, actually. Like being an 8 on the Enneagram, I like that.
I'm excited because I think that JT and I are going to will be pretty aligned in a lot of things, maybe.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately for me, as someone that likes to not, the joke is that I don't like to answer questions. I think that I'm going to have to share my opinion on a lot more things because I suspect I'm not going to agree with a lot of things that you said. Yep. But I think that's great.
We'll have a bell where Danny avoids answering a question. Ding.
But I think it'll be cool from the sense of we've all developed this friendship. And we don't all agree on things. And we all have different experiences and what we think is valuable. If JT and Kyle were here on the Megachurch thing, I think it would have been so much more nuanced added to it, of their thoughts. And that's what I think will be fun. It's it'll add a little more perspective to the conversation. So hopefully everyone will feel represented. And again, we're going to have about twice a month, like a stream of people coming in, if I'm remembering right, like some interviews and stuff like that. So we'll have some people in the conversation with us, which I think will be cool. So.
Yeah. So stick along, follow us on all the things, get notified, subscribe.
Smash that
like button.
But yes, stay on our channels. So it's like we're not leaving anywhere. Just know that the rhythm of content will change, and we're only sharing so that you guys can get prepared. But we're staying here. We're just adding a few people to the Deconstruction Zone family. We're excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll announce it at nauseum.
Yes.
But with more clarity in the weeks to come.
With more clarity than July-ish. Yeah, we're kind of doing this thing.
We're kind of doing this thing. But
it's kind of like Star Trek, except we don't know what Star Trek is like.
We'll watch Star Trek. Hey, don't forget
to embrace
the journey.
I feel like I've gotten a lot better at that.
You have. I've messed up.